Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Sunday morning Labor Day weekend at the sanctuary. I'm happy that you're here today to join me for a few minutes and excited about life. I hope you're still excited about life. Boy, it's a time when it might be easy to be bored, but I hope you're finding things to occupy your mind and your interest. I keep thinking, when is this going to end? When are we going to be able to get back together in person again? And every time I start thinking, well, maybe in a couple of weeks, like earlier this week, Lisa and I were in Amarillo, and I was thinking maybe in a couple of weeks we can get together. And then we got a text from the city of Austin that said, don't be with other people this weekend. Don't go out in public. And I thought, well, it ain't over yet, but we're going to hang in there and continue to look forward to the time when we can see you here in person and not just a name on a screen or a face on a screen. But I do hope you're having a good weekend. I hope you'll enjoy your Labor Day to the extent it's possible these days. I wanted to show you a couple of pictures. Man, great things are happening around the church. You remember out next to the cottage next door, we had, for several years, we had that big garden plot out there with fencing and railroad ties. And then that project came to an end and it was just a big eyesore sitting there. Well, let me show you, as of this week, it's gone. It's gone, like it never existed. All the garden stuff has been removed, the ground has been resodded, and it looks beautiful again, a beautiful open lawn. And so I'm grateful to our council and to Brad Birchfield especially, and the contractors who have done such a great job on that. Closer to the building, though, we had problems around our foundation. We had skirting around the bottom of the building. Our building is a pier and beam building, and it had skirting around the bottom, and it had just begun to crumble and had huge holes in it. And that's how all kinds of critters were getting inside. I can't tell you how many times, at least 25 times in the past couple of years, I've heard raccoons in the ductwork above my office. Really hard to concentrate when you hear a gigantic rodent crawling and clambering about right over your head. Well, look at this now. All that skirting has been replaced. Concrete, cinder block. It's a beautiful thing now. And so we're getting ready for the day when you can be back here. Everything's going to be better. We're just about ready to start on the bathroom renovation project. I'm hoping we can maybe get that in before people come back to the campus. But if not, just know that just because you can't come by here right now, or you haven't come by here right now, it doesn't mean things are not happening, that things are not being fixed and improved and updated, because they are. All right, great to have you here this morning. Let's get right into the message, shall we? Today's message is called God's Harmonica. God's Harmonica, and I'll explain to you what that title means later on. But the gist of the message today, the theme of the message today, is something that's hugely important to me, and that is music. Music is a part of all of our lives. It's everywhere we turn. It's on TV. You hear it when you're on hold on your phone. You hear it while you buy groceries in the store or while you drive your car. Maybe your alarm clock even wakes you up with music in the mornings. We hear music at every graduation ceremony, at every wedding, at every funeral. And I don't know about you, but a lot of my memories are connected with music. Music can take me back to a specific time in my life when something particular happened. But music has always been important to me from very, very early on. There's my early career as a drummer. Now that's me, that's not my guitar. I don't know how to play the guitar at that point. Later on though, starting about 13, I did learn how to play the guitar. And then later on switched to playing piano and singing and doing other things. But music has always been very important to me. When I was a toddler, maybe 3 years old, my great aunt would give me a quarter to hold a broom like a guitar and to sing "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog" while I wiggled my hips around. I don't know where I learned how to do that. I must have seen Elvis somewhere. But when I think back on it now, I was probably the very first professional paid Elvis impersonator at the age of 3. I remember the music of growing up in Sunday school. Many of you do too. The music when you're a beginner. Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. Climb, climb up Sunshine Mountain, heavenly breezes blow. Those songs are wired into me now because I learned them when I was 3 years old. I sang my first solo in church when I was 12. I joined the choir when I was 12. I sang alto until my voice changed. And then when I was in 5th grade, I got in the band. Later was in the marching band, went to all the football games. Me and another guy would take our guitars on the bus. We would sing all the way to the game and back on the bus. My favorite thing, though, when I was a teenager was going to camp every summer, church camp. Because at church camp, they had a talent show every year. And that meant that once a year, I would get to stand up on a stage and sing a song all by myself to an audience that was listening to me. And man, I prepared for that months in advance. And it was such a thing I looked forward to so much, to sing and to hear applause from people. It was a huge deal. I remember getting my first car. My dad helped me put an 8-track tape player in it so I could have my own music everywhere I went. 8-track tapes, you didn't have to do anything. You put it in there and it would play forever. Just there would occasionally be just a ka-chunk as it changed tracks, but you didn't have to touch it. Music was so much a part of my life that when I decided to propose to Lisa, I didn't want to do something normal. Instead, I wrote a song in which I asked her to marry me. I went into a studio here in Austin and recorded all the tracks myself. And then I talked a radio station into playing it at a certain time while we were sitting in Zilker Gardens. And she heard it on the radio. This is the moment she heard my song, and I asked her to marry me. Music is huge to me. It's been in every moment of my life. And so I decided I would be a music major when I went to college. May have been a mistake because when I got to college, everything was about classical music. Nobody wanted to hear about the Beach Boys when I was a music major. There were people who'd been playing the violin since they were 2. There were people who'd been singing in 6 or 7 languages since they were 5. My entire knowledge of classical music came from Bugs Bunny cartoons. In fact, I thought there was an opera called Kill the Wabbit, Kill the Wabbit, Kill the Wabbit. You remember that. That's all I knew about classical music. See, when I was in high school, there were 2 groups of people. There were kickers and there were surfers. Kickers were people who listened to country music. Surfers were people that listened to top 40 music. I was a surfer, but most of my friends were kickers, and you know what? We got along. We disagreed about stuff, and we still liked each other. Wouldn't that be nice to go back to? Yeah. But once I got out of college, I noticed a lot of people kind of stopped listening to music. I would increasingly go to record stores, which I used to do at least twice a week, and I noticed I was soon the oldest guy in the record store. Why were my peers not buying music anymore? And then eventually it happened to me too. I started listening to talk radio. And I thought, yeah, this is fine. I'll just listen to this. And you know what? I think it harmed me. I think listening to talk radio damaged me. It first made me stop singing when I drove my car. And second, it made me an angrier person, a more cynical person. And the day I finally decided I'm not going to listen to this anymore, I'm going to start listening to music again, I felt better immediately. My demeanor changed. My temper grew less. See, music to me was as important as food or water. I was one of the first people in line when Apple came out with this little device called the iPod. And the slogan was, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Wow. It was like having a radio station that only played the songs I liked with no commercials and no DJs to interrupt. My opinion is that we are not just carbon-based life forms. We are music-based. Go back and read your Bible from the very beginning. You don't have to go very far into Genesis. In fact, only to chapter 4 to run into this guy, Jubal. The Bible tells us that Jubal was the father of all who make music, the father of all who play instruments, who sing songs. Imagine what that must have been like. Imagine hearing music for the first time at a time when human beings were just learning how to put a seed in the ground and a plant would grow from it. Food would come out of the ground. At the same time they were learning to do that and use a stone as a hammer, the same time that was happening, they were figuring out music. Well, what I want to tell you today is that you are musical. And I know some of you would say, well, I'm not musical. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I'm not musical. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And I'm going to show you. And just like a good song, I'm going to show you in 3 verses and a coda. Verse number 1. I want you to know today, you are a song. You are a song. God composed you like a great composer writes a piece of music, one note, one syllable at a time. He made you because he had a creative idea, an impulse. That verse in Genesis says, God formed Adam out of the dust of the earth, and he breathed life into Adam. The word that's used for breathe there is inspire, to breathe into. See, when an artist is inspired, he paints a picture, or he writes a poem, or he carves a sculpture, or he composes a song. When God is inspired, he creates you. You are God's song. You are a hit on God's hit parade. Now, God has a pretty big songbook by now, as you can imagine. Billions and billions of songs. And yet each one is different. Each one is crafted by the master musician. Now, maybe you're not the kind of song you would wish to be. We can't all be national anthems or Happy Birthday or Auld Lang Syne. But unlike the deacons at some churches I worked at in my life, God likes all kinds of music. From commercial jingles to opera, from country to reggae. It's all beautiful music. You are beautiful music, created to praise God. The great Louis Armstrong, what an amazing human being he was. He was asked once in the early 60s, at the time the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary were becoming popular. A reporter asked Louis Armstrong if he liked folk music. And Louis said, all music is folk music. I ain't never heard no horse sing a song. It's true. And like all music is folk music, all folks are God's music. See, nearly 77 years ago, God said, I want to hear something different today. I want to hear some Mike Robertson. And with one holy breath, he started the song that is me. And he's been listening to it ever since. And he says, I like that one. I'm glad I wrote that. It's catchy. I'm a song. And you are too. If you think I'm wrong, how do you explain the fact that after we die, we decompose? Sorry. At least the physical part of us does, but that's another great thing about music. It's not bound by physical limitations. We can hear music today that was written hundreds of years ago and still enjoy it. There's so many songs, so many varieties. There are happy songs. There are funeral dirges. There are songs that make you pat your foot, songs that make you cry. And since we are God's songs, we exist in equal variety. Some of us are a little melancholy. Some of us are the blues. Some of us are upbeat, peppy. Some are very brief songs, and some seem to last forever. Some become popular and are known by millions, and others put the solo in solitude. But it takes all kinds. It would be interesting to see if there was any song that we could get everybody to agree on and say, yes, we like that song. Is there a song that everybody likes? I don't know. But God likes and listens to everything. You, my friend, are one of God's beautiful, beautiful songs. Well, let's move on to verse 2. You are a song, but it doesn't end there. You are also an instrument. Now, I love musical instruments. I have a collection. I didn't really intend to start collecting, but I have a collection of some unusual musical instruments. For instance, I have a bass ocarina made of wood. I have a thumb piano. You play it with your thumbs. I have a nose flute. Yeah, you play it with your nose. I have something called a bowed psaltery. And I have other instruments like a cajon, a melodica, and even something about 100 years old called a rollmonica, which you blow into this part right here, while you turn these little cranks on the side. And inside is a little paper roll with holes in it, and you blow into it, and it plays like a player piano. The little holes in the paper say which notes you're going to produce as you turn the crank. I've heard people in church play a musical saw. I saw an evangelist one time who played hymns on glasses. He had like 3 dozen different glasses filled with different levels of water, and he called it the glass harmonica. And he could play amazing sounding songs on it. There are so many different instruments, so many ways to make music. We haven't exhausted them yet. People are coming up with new instruments all the time. Do you remember, I know you've heard the famous prayer by St. Francis of Assisi. Remember how it starts? St. Francis said this: Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. See, St. Francis knew that an instrument could transform hatred into love. Music really does have charms to soothe the savage breast. But if you have a musical idea, how do you share it with anybody? Well, you share it through an instrument, whether it be a trumpet or a bongo drum or your voice, and you sing it. Well, how does God share his ideas? His ideas of love and grace and hope through instruments like you and you and you. You are an instrument of God's love and grace. Let me show you a word and see if you've ever heard of it. Do you know what a luthier is? Not a Lutheran, a luthier. A luthier is somebody who makes stringed instruments. A few years ago, I watched a movie, not a very good movie, but there was bonus features on the DVD, and one of them was an interview with a luthier who made all the instruments used in this movie. And this special feature was much better than the movie, for me anyway. He said, he was asked, what makes a great instrument? How do you make a good musical instrument? And he said, there's a lot of factors. You have to find just the right wood. You have to shape it just so. You have to brace it inside because it has to be strong enough to withstand the pressure generated by all those steel strings that are tuned very tightly, but yet it still has to be weak enough to move air. See, I don't know if you've ever seen inside a guitar. It's not just a hollow box. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. And while this might look like a really cool living room with a skylight, this is inside a guitar. I would like to have a living room that looked like that. It'd be really cool. But he said, the ideal you're looking for is when the instrument is just on the verge of falling apart. He said, that's probably going to be a pretty good instrument. And boy, I thought that will preach right there. When you're weak enough to move the air, but strong enough to withstand the pressure, you might be a great instrument. You know the marks on the neck of a guitar? You know what those are called? These things right here? Those are called frets. Frets. And the frets on the neck of a guitar are what make it possible to play individual notes and not just kind of slide from one to the other. Frets are what make it possible to play a tune on a stringed instrument. Now, what determines the quality of the sound that an instrument makes? Well, I'm happy to tell you it's not the newest instrument. It's not the most expensive instrument. It's not the prettiest instrument. You know, the most valuable violins are literally hundreds of years old. And have you ever seen Willie Nelson's guitar? Look at this thing. It's battered, it's worn, it's got signatures all over. It's got a gigantic hole right in the middle of it. And Willie has a technician whose job is to keep his guitar in playable condition because he doesn't want to switch to a new guitar. And so this doesn't look like much, but when Willie plays it, it sounds great. That's what we are. We are fragile little boxes of air on the verge of collapse, full of frets. We're full of frets, maybe old and battered, but God can make beautiful music through us. How? Well, there are two important things to keep in mind. First is you got to be in tune. If the instrument is not in tune, the sounds are going to be abrasive and harsh and not pleasing to the ear. They will actually drive people away. A violinist can't say, I think I'll tune my strings to whatever notes I think they should be. Well, he wouldn't be in harmony with the other instruments. He would sound bad. The other important component, besides being in tune, is who's playing the instrument? Who is in control? There's an old poem I learned in grade school. And later on, that poem was set to music by several different people. I've sung it many, many times. It talks about this very idea. I could recite you that poem today. But would you mind if I sing it instead? It goes like this. Well, it was battered and scarred in the auction it felt. It was hardly worth his while to waste much time on the old violin. He held it up with a smile. Sure ain't much, but it's all we got left. I guess we ought to sell it too. Now who's got a bid on this old violin? Just one more and we'll be through. And then he cried, one, give me $1. Who'll make it two? Only $2? Who'll make it three? $3 twice, now that's a good price. But who's got a bid for me? Raise up your hand and don't wait any longer. The auction's about to end. So who's got four? Just $1 more to bid on this old violin. Well, the air was hot and the people stood around as the sun was sinking low. From the back of the crowd, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the gold. He wiped the dust from the old violin and tightened up the string. And then he played out a melody pure and sweet as the angels sing. When the music stopped, the auctioneer, in a voice that was soft and low, he said, now what is my bid on this old violin? He held it up with a bow. And then he cried out, one, give me 1,000. Who'll make it two? Only 2,000. Who'll make it three? 3,000 twice. Now that's a good price, but who's got a bid for me? The people cried out, what made the change? We don't understand. The auctioneer stopped and he said with a smile, it was the touch of the master's hand. there's many a man with his life out of tune, battered and scarred by sin. He's auctioned cheap to a thankless crowd, much like that old violin. Oh, but then the master comes and the foolish crowd, they never understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the master's hand. One, give me 1,000. Who'll make it two? Only 2,000. Who'll make it three? 3,000 twice. That's a pretty good price, but who's got a bid for me? The people cried out, what made the change? We don't understand. The auctioneer stopped and said with a smile, it was the touch of the master's hand. Just one touch of the master's hand. Just the touch of the master's hand. You see, if we are in tune and we allow the master to play, it doesn't matter how old and beat up and weary we may feel. The master's hand is going to help us to produce beautiful, beautiful, inspiring music. You are an instrument. Let God play you. Well, let's get to that third verse. Verse 3, you are a song. You are an instrument. And finally, you are a composer. That's right, you're a songwriter. You may not have ever seen yourself as that way, but every day you write the music. You write the song that is your life. Look, here's a typical musical score. Everything is right there in black and white. The musician who looks at this doesn't have to wonder what notes should be played when. He doesn't have to be confused about what happens in measure 18. It's right there. If you were a jazz musician, though, you might see something like this instead. Now, if you look at that, there's not a single note written on there anywhere. There's just some chords, and a jazz musician has to play just based on those chords. Well, I got to tell you, my life is jazz. Yours probably is too, because when I get up in the morning, I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't have a complete musical score laid out that says you're going to do this and this and this and this and this. No, all I know is maybe a bare outline like a jazz musician gets. So how does a jazz guy know what to play? Well, he has a fundamental knowledge of scales and keys and riffs and melodies of thousands of songs. And with all that foundation, when the solo comes and the leader points to him, he relies on all that plus how he feels, plus the musicians he's playing with, plus what's happened that day to him. And all of a sudden, it just pours out of him. He couldn't even tell you what he was going to play 5 seconds in advance. He doesn't know. But it comes out and it's amazing. Life is improv. Life is jazz. So how do we know what to play each day? Well, we have fundamentals too. We can learn God's rules for conduct by reading his score, the Bible. We can talk to him and let him talk to us. And when we have those fundamentals in place, music will come forth. Not just for God to hear, but for others to hear also. Finally, you are a song. You are an instrument. You are a composer. Here's a coda. You know what a coda is? That's a little extra part at the end. Have you ever been to a concert where an orchestra plays and they come to this big finale and the music stops and people kind of start to applaud, but then the music goes on. Let me give you a little tip on how you can avoid that situation. Don't watch the players. They might come to a point where they have a rest and the clarinetist may put her horn down, but then there's more to come. Here's who you watch. You watch the conductor. See, the conductor may cut the orchestra off after a rousing section, but as long as his arms are up, there's more music to come. So the orchestra is playing along. But the arms are still up, and then they go, bum, ba, 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 bum. And he cuts them off, and when he puts his arm down, that's when the music has ended. When I first wrote this message, the church I was at was going through a really hard time. They had a lot of people leave. There had been a big split. There were hurt feelings everywhere. I shared with them what I share with you right now, and that is God is not finished with us. God is not finished with the sanctuary. 3 years ago when I came here and there were 10 people here on Sunday morning, it seemed like that might be the closing fade out for our song. But you know what? I'm going to keep looking at the conductor, and I'm convinced that God is not finished with us yet. He's just giving the downbeat to a new section of music to keep us playing on. Keep your eyes on the conductor and let the music play on. Oh, I promised I was going to explain why this sermon is called God's Harmonica. I originally was going to call it something like God's saxophone or God's tambourine. And I thought, well, what about the harmonica? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized what a perfect word that was. Because a harmonica is the only instrument that you play by blowing into, but also by inhaling. You breathe in and out, the same way God breathed in and out when he created people the first time. He inspires us. He plays through us. But also, when I Googled the term God's harmonica, I was surprised to find that there was one musical instrument that some people referred to as God's harmonica. You know what it was? It was the very first Hammond organ, the first little portable electric organ that when I grew up, virtually every church had one. Every funeral home had a Hammond organ. And they called it God's harmonica because it was played by the air constantly being pumped through it. And I thought, well, if a church organ is God's harmonica, that's an appropriate name for this sermon. You are God's favorite song. You are a beautiful instrument through which God wants to play beautiful melodies for people to hear. And you are a composer, a writer of a life that is as interesting as you want it to be. Don't say tomorrow, I'm just going to put a measure full of rests. That could be a great chorus, a great hook, a really hummable melody that you can start even right this moment. I love you all, and love wins. Thank you for being here this morning, and we'll see you next Sunday morning. Bye-bye.